Hi, everybody. This week we get to learn more about Saul, who became the Apostle Paul. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Saul here in our video. Saul was probably born around the same time as Jesus, around the same year as Jesus. We're not really sure what year it was, but it was probably about the same time as Jesus. He grew up in a city called Tarsus. And as Saul grew up, he learned to be a tent maker, to make tents, which he used to his advantage during his life, which we'll probably talk about more during our class time on Wednesday. Saul also received a good education in Jerusalem to become a Pharisee. This means that he learned to read and write Hebrew. He studied the Old Testament a lot, and he probably had good parts of the Old Testament committed to memory, meaning he could recite by memory large portions of the Old Testament. Paul was very passionate about being a Jew. A couple of times in his New Testament letters, Paul says that he was the best Jew and the best Pharisee of his generation. He was such a strong Jew that we find out that Saul hated Christians and was there when a crowd of Jews stoned Stephen to death. You remember that from your reading from Acts from last week? But Jesus changed Saul in a miraculous way. As Saul was going to Damascus to arrest Christians, Jesus appeared to him. And that happened around 3 years after Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead. So we're talking around 36 AD. And for the next 30 years, Saul traveled around the world telling others about Jesus. And he often experienced the same type of persecution that he had inflicted on the Christians. And as we learned last week, sometimes when you tell others about Jesus, they're going to oppose or persecute you. And that certainly happened to Saul. And you'll hear about it and read about it in your lesson this week. Sometimes people like to make a big deal about Saul's name being changed to Paul. But actually, Luke in the book of Acts doesn't make a big deal about it at all. He simply says in Acts chapter 13, verse 9, "Then Saul, who is called Paul." That's all he says, is that Saul was also called Paul. So God doesn't change Saul's name when he becomes a Christian. The most we can say is that we know that Saul, a Jew, was also a Roman citizen. If you were a Jew, you weren't born with Roman citizenship. You had to earn Roman citizenship. So somehow, some way, either Saul or his father had earned Roman citizenship. And as a Roman citizen, Saul would probably have been given a Roman name. Thus, Saul, who was also known as Paul. And as Saul was traveling in the Roman Empire and talking to non-Jewish people about Jesus, he chose to use his Roman name, Paul, to fit in. Now we know that Saul made 3 missionary journeys around the Roman Empire telling other people about Jesus. He started churches in many cities and towns. And after he left those places, he often wrote them letters. And there are 27 books in the New Testament, and Paul is the author of 13 of them, almost half of the books in the New Testament. And so he's certainly an important person in the New Testament. But none of that may have been possible if it hadn't been for a guy by the name of Barnabas. After Saul became a Christian, he went to Jerusalem to meet with Jesus' other apostles. And they were afraid of Saul, and they didn't believe that Saul had really become a Christian. But it was Barnabas who brought Saul to the apostles and defended Saul and told them that he really had become a Christian and really had seen Jesus. Now, Barnabas' name means son of encouragement. If it wasn't for Barnabas' encouragement, Saul may never have become the Paul we know today. So this week, I want you to find a way to be like Barnabas. Find someone that you can encourage this week. Maybe it's a friend who is having a bad day, a brother or a sister who failed a test, or your mom or dad who are tired and need a little help. But find someone that you can encourage, maybe by saying something nice, or by doing something nice for them. Be a Barnabas this week. See you guys on Wednesday, and I can't wait to tell you more about Paul. God bless.